Chris, can you just take us through, in your perspective, what took place this morning and how the footy department's handling the situation?
Well, we're just trying to stay calm and prioritise the right things, which for us is really clear. It's making sure that we do everything we can to support Stephen and to give him and his family kind of the space that they deserve. I think I want to be careful that I don't say too much now that may not be accurate and then have to kind of clarify that later. But I think it's reasonable at the moment, even before we've had the chance to speak to Stephen directly, that for us to prioritise his health, it would be irresponsible for us to even consider him to be around over the next 24 hours or so. I'm led to believe that there is a chance that he could get a clean bill of health really quickly, but out of an abundance of caution, it just seems logical to us and the right thing to do. And in these situations, it does reinforce that there is a right thing that supersedes football. Now, I suspect that if he's feeling good, he'll be disappointed to hear that news. Even if he's not feeling that great, he'll be disappointed because he's a competitor. But even at this pointy end of the season, it reinforces to us what the right thing is over lesser priorities. Keep going. No, you're right.
How are you as a colleague, obviously, and how are the players as well?
Well, look, it's upsetting, and it has an impact on the players. And look, I don't take the view with these things that you've got to pretend that something isn't happening. What we've got to do is just sort of deal with where we are. Now, again, the feedback's really positive, so we will do our best to focus on that positive, but it is quite confronting. And our club, we've had sort of similar sort of episodes to this. I don't know exactly what it is at the moment, but our experience is you've just got to deal with the situation as it presents. And we think that if we're guided by the philosophy of just making sure that we do everything we can for Stephen and his family, then it's likely we'll make good decisions. In these situations, any football priorities come second. But also, it doesn't mean that we can't be good enough to compartmentalise these things and sort of move on and get on with what we can control. So thoughts and prayers and all those things, but we're really confident. And again, at the a footy club on field is a pretty good place to have a medical episode. We've got fantastic people here. They responded really quickly. An ambulance was on the field, almost instantly, it seemed to me. So that gives us some confidence as well.
It's been a big week in Stephen's life. Is it the early thought that the taxing nature of what's happened in the last 3 or 4 days has contributed to this?
Well, possibly. He's a workaholic, but I don't think it'd be prudent for me to speculate as to sort of the causes. Look, he has been working pretty hard, and it is a stressful sort of situation to be at this point of the season, full stop. But then, when you add in there is a bit of stress and excitement at the prospect that he could be facing over in Perth. But I've only really known him well for 12 months, and he's a very resilient character. I'm confident he'll bounce back, and I'm not going to say he's going to be better for it, but I'm really confident, just the character that I know, that he'll be fine.
Chris, can you just paint a picture of how Stephen was before he went to hospital? Was he conscious and communicating again? And we understand he was.
So I wasn't there in person, but that's the feedback I've got. I saw enough personally to know that, yes, conscious, talking, breathing normally, it would be a mistake to then extrapolate from there as to what that would mean. But I think it's reasonable, given the feedback that I've got, to say that this isn't a really sort of, this isn't a life-threatening situation. So again, I've probably said more than I should have already, but it's just the feedback we've got is that we should be calm and positive about it. So that's what I'd like to pass on to you.
How did you handle that with the players? Did you bring them in and similar to when an injury happens in a game or something like that? Can you just shed a bit of light on how you did handle it in the initial moments after?
Yeah, that's not a bad comparison. It is similar because, again, if you have a bad injury on field, my view is you can't ask your players to pretend it hasn't happened, and there will be an initial shock, and so there were some logistical issues. When are we going to go back out there? So we sort of sorted through them, and then, at least from my part, and I think Andrew Mackie shares his view as well. It's not our role to tell them how they should think and how they should feel. We're just, our commitment to them was we will communicate the information as we get it, as timely as we possibly can, and give them a little bit of time to get themselves sorted. And when the time's right, just make sure we do the things that we had planned to get ready for the game tomorrow night.
From a footy perspective, can you talk us through selection? I think a few people externally were a bit surprised to see Zach Tui out for Tom.
Yeah, and that makes sense to me. Always really difficult situations with selection at this time of year, and yeah, that was one of the harder calls that I think we've had to make in a long time. But I'll emphasise that it was a call that we made given the circumstances of this particular game. Now, if we play well enough and we get through, then the circumstances are different, which will give rise to a whole new set of questions that we need to answer. But I think that more broadly, as a coaching group in particular, we've been really proud of the way that our players have approached the last month or two, because we have had some very highly credentialed players, and Zach's clearly one of those, who have been in the mix, who unfortunately aren't playing tomorrow night. But the way they've conducted themselves, the way they've given to the team, it's been really impressive. And sometimes the mark of a person is how they deal and how they carry themselves in a situation where they're clearly feeling great disappointment. And so Sam DeConing's in that category, Hawkins, Guthrie, Zach Tui, there are others as well. So, yeah, difficult, but... and I think the thing is that we don't often say this as coaches, I don't think, but I'm not even sure it's the right call. But it's a call we made. So even after the fact, we're not going to be able to prove whether it was right or wrong, but the only thing we can guarantee is that a lot of thought went into it. And it was, the requisite time and consideration and stress went into that decision.
With the threat of Joe Danaher, how strongly did you consider bringing Sam back?
Yeah, really, really strongly. And look, there's a whole lot of things that go into that decision that I'm not going to walk you through now. But the obvious one with Sam is that he hasn't had the preparation that some of our other guys have had. Now, I think I've said enough about Sam over the years for everyone to be clear on how highly I rate him. But at this time of year, when you're really in there, and they are so close to 50-50 decisions, that the pendulum does sort of sneak towards the guys who have had a better preparation. Now, the fortunate thing for Sam is that he has got a lot of work in since he had that surgery. He's played a couple of VFL games. So again, if we're good enough on Saturday night, then the conversation changes again. We go back to square one and work through that painstaking process again.
So with Tom Hawkins and Cam Guthrie, I heard you say that they weren't fit and available, so were they not even in the selection consideration? No,
they just weren't considered for this week. So again, exactly the same category as the others. Now they sort of are individuals within that category, but we'll reassess that situation if we're good enough on Saturday night. But yeah, the message should be clear. We didn't consider them based on the preparation they've had for this week, but that no one should read anything into what that means for the following week.
How close were they to this week as far as selection goes?
It's hard to quantify. Look, they weren't close enough for us to feel like an extra few days were going to make the difference. So we were confident making that call sort of earlier in the week to get some certainty there for one. But yeah, it's. No, I think I'd be upfront with you if we were certain that they weren't going to be ready the following week either. So that, I think that gives you an indication of sort of how close they were.
How important to keep guys like Jed Hughes and Mullen in as well, those more defensive kind of guys who could play a potential lockdown role on the Lions.
Yeah, we've always been of the view that we're not searching for our best 23. We're looking for the best 23 in the circumstances, and Jed's a good story, really. He when I speak of players who have handled themselves well through adversity, Jed's the one that springs to mind this year. He basically didn't play in our AFL team at all, but led the younger guys really well, kept his head up, stayed positive, and when he got his chance, he took it. And the circumstances this week meant that we felt that he and O'Sheen were the right players to have in the team. So, there's some nuance there that I generally don't go into, but we're confident we've picked. Yeah, we're confident we've picked a team based on all the things we've talked about that's the best for our circumstances. And I say confident without being 100% sure, as I said earlier. It's just the reality of these decisions.
We saw Max Holmes out on the track 20 minutes for the rest of his teammates and he wasn't part of the group. Is he 100%? Is that part of his normal prep? And is there a bit of extra emphasis this week for Max given what happened 2 years ago in Prelim final weekend?
I don't think so. But again, I think our job as sort of leaders of the club is certainly to influence and to make suggestions, but we don't tell our players how to feel. Now, my suggestion would be that if you're focusing on something 2 years ago, your mind isn't in the right spot. But some people are good enough to use those sort of things as, I don't know, short-term inspiration, or maybe they sort of learn their lessons from them. I don't think there's anything for Max to take away from that game 2 years ago, personally, except maybe that he can say his body's in super shape, and the last, the 2 years he's had since that moment, physically have been really good for him. But I think everyone can see on field that he was an important player for us back then, not as important as he is now. So that should give him some confidence.
Is that normal prep for him to?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, the first bit. Mac, what was the issue?
No, he could catch yesterday, so he's fine.
Yeah. So right at the moment, I'm sure every club's the same. We all want to move past COVID, but every now and again you get the reminder that when someone sneezes, they get quarantined, and we're maybe a little more. Our attention to detail is a little heightened at this time of year than it might be for a round 14 game, but yeah, you don't have to do much to get separated from the group these days.
Yeah, cool.
What do you make of the discussion around the ideal preparation for a prelim, whether it's playing 2 games in the space of a month or if it's getting through and winning, 2 games beforehand? What do you make of that debate? Do you feel like you're better placed than Brisbane when it comes to preparation for a preliminary final?
I try not to think about it in terms of an us versus them thing. I would probably frame it as we would have preferred to have won in the first week. So I think that sort of answers the question to an extent. But then every team's a little bit different. And I'm assuming before the fact, you kind of engineer your response based on the circumstances you find yourself in. So I'll have a go at that. I think with the personnel that we have, and we do have some important players who we load manage throughout the year. So to get to this point where we feel like that's been done for us to an extent, we could choose the level of their load up over the last sort of 3 weeks or so has been advantageous for us. And you'll get more information post-game, but even then I sort of suspect, it's a bit like when we play poorly generally. It's like there's all these things that pop up that are all of a sudden not an issue the next week when you do play well. So yeah, I'm assuming that the analysis in part will be, if we win, we had a better prep, and if they win, they had a better prep. And I suspect neither of them will be true, or at least the main reason.
With a side on the quick backup, is the start the thing you need to be most wary of? I mean, scientifically, you guys should maybe have more run in your legs, but just that they couldn't hit the ground running.
Maybe, but I think if they hit the ground running, it's more likely because they've been a good starting team, and that's kind of who they are, rather than any preparation. And I think the logic's really sound that a good start in a big game is important. The harder part has always been how you get that. So I hope that I'm not a coach that stands up in front of the players and says, now remember, we've got to try as hard as we can and we need a good start. Because once I'm down to those two, there mustn't be much left.
So do you trust they'll be at the right levels, or do you have an ace in the sleeve to make sure they're heightened? Because they have had a week off.
Yeah, well, that's the art of it. And there is a little bit of science to support the preparation that we've had. I think that's your description then is the better one, and that is the art of trying to bring a group together and to make sure they're ready. We don't have an ace up our sleeve, but a lot of thought goes into that. The only thing I rail against is making the obvious, more even more obvious. Like, yes, we want to start well. All those things are implied. These are the things we need to focus on to have the game played the way we want to. And we're confident. Even with a little bit of extra time, we found ourselves reinforcing a lot of what we do. So it's not as if we use the extra time to try to reinvent the wheel or come up with something drastically different. But yeah, again, I think it's a bit different. It's a bit different to normal games in that we had a week off pre-finals and then we had another week off, but we'd like to frame that as a positive. And we certainly would have preferred, even if it's not 100% positive, it would have been our preference.
Stranger to prelims, does it get any easier or harder kind of coming up with, I guess, your kind of resume and background?
Well, I've got to stay true to what I believe in, which is I just try to be in the moment. And I think of every season in isolation, as much as possible, every game in isolation. Our coaches and list management groups need to plan. But when you get to this point, I get no solace from looking back on the things we've done well. Maybe you sort of learn from a little bit and feel a bit better. And I get no motivation at all from the times when we haven't quite delivered. I'm just trying to get the next bit right. But I think sometimes in the past I've said things like that and it sounds like you shouldn't feel that way either. Your job's different to mine, and you can sort of think whatever you like, but for us, in these moments, the high performers, they're not looking for short-term inspiration, or they're not searching for something to help them do their best. I think we've got that bit covered at the very least.
Not even a social media post?
Oh, well, I mean, there's a long conversation here, but if I talk about it, it's going to sound like I'm making comment about players and coaches from other clubs. But I think I've said enough to kind of convey the idea that we're at the point where we're thinking about the things we want to think about and not letting anyone else shape our frame of mind.
Did you try and get on the G today? Sorry, just quickly.
We chose not to. I'm sure we would have had access if we had chosen to.
Chris, not high on your agenda probably, but Brownlow tip for Monday night?
I'm hopeless at these. It'll be a midfielder. But the coaches chose a midfielder as well, so